So, how do you even begin to tell the story of Amazon? How does a company go from a business plan literally written in the passenger seat of a car to a $2 trillion empire? Well, today we're going to unpack that story. And it all begins not with some grand vision for an everything store, but with one single mind-blowing number. This is it. This is the number that changed everything. Back in 1994, Jeff Bezos was a big shot on Wall Street. He stumbled across a report that said the internet was growing at 2,300% a year. Now look, that's not growth. That is a tidal wave, an explosion. And Bezos knew. He just knew. He had to figure out a way to write. So who is this guy, right? Who bets their entire, very successful career on a single statistic? You gotta understand, even as a kid, Jeff Bezos was, well, he was different. He was his high school's valedictorian, and for his graduation speech, he talked about building hotels in space. Seriously, that ambition took him to Wall Street, but it was that number, 2,300%, that sparked the idea that would become Amazon.
Okay, so the internet is exploding. What do you sell on it? Good question. Bezos actually made a list of 20 different possibilities, but one of them just jumped off the page: books. And when you think about it, the logic was just brilliant. I mean, there are millions of different book titles, way more than any physical store could ever hope to stock. They're all pretty much the same shape, easy to ship, and people were already used to buying them. Books weren't the end goal. They were just the perfect gateway drug to get people hooked on shopping online.
But making this leap meant leaving a very comfortable life behind. When he went to his boss, David Shaw, and told him he was quitting his high-paying hedge fund job to sell books on the internet, this was the response he got. And you know what? It's perfectly logical, safe advice. It was also completely and totally wrong. Bezos just knew that he'd regret not trying way more than he'd regret failing.
So that was that. He and his wife Mackenzie packed up their stuff and just started driving west. And what happens next is the stuff of pure startup legend. She's driving and he's in the passenger seat, banging out the entire business plan for Amazon on a laptop. The whole foundation of the company was built somewhere between New York and Seattle at about 65 miles an hour. And the company almost wasn't called Amazon. The first idea was Cadabra, as in abracadabra. But he had to scrap that after his lawyer misheard it on the phone as cadaver. Yeah, not exactly great for branding. He also really loved the name Relentless. And fun fact, if you type relentless.com into your browser today, you'll see where it goes. But in the end, he landed on Amazon. It started with an A, which put it at the top of all those old alphabetized web directories. And of course, it was named after the biggest river in the world, which gives you a little hint about the scale of his ambition. So that idea, literally born on the road, quickly grew from a garage in Seattle into a full-blown siege on the entire retail industry. But it wasn't a straight line up. It was a journey that involved explosive growth and a near-death experience that really forged the company into the giant it is today.
Those early days were just pure chaotic energy. The motto was simple: get big fast. The culture was famously cheap. I mean, their desks were literally just doors that they bought from a hardware store. In the very beginning, they had a bell in the office that would ring every time they made a sale. They eventually had to turn it off because it just would not stop ringing. And by 1997, they were a public company, even though they were nowhere close to making a profit.
So the dot-com bubble is inflating, and Amazon stock just goes vertical. It flies past $100 a share. Wall Street was obsessed. It felt like the party was never gonna end. And then the bubble popped. Overnight, the whole thing just fell apart. Tech stocks imploded. And Amazon, a company that was still burning through cash like crazy, saw its stock price crash from over $100 all the way down to just $6. Analysts were calling for bankruptcy, the media was calling them Amazon.bomb. Everyone thought they were toast, but they didn't die. You could argue the crash is what made them. It was like being forged in fire. It forced them to get laser focused. First, they built out their own massive warehouse network to control their own destiny. Then, in 2005, they launched Prime. Competitors thought it was financial suicide, but Bezos knew it was a psychological mousetrap. Once you get used to 2-day shipping, you can't go back. And then came the Kindle, where they didn't just sell books, they tried to make paper books obsolete.
But here's the thing. Maybe the most important thing Amazon was building was happening almost by accident, totally behind the scenes. While the whole world was watching their retail business, Amazon was quietly building the very foundation of the modern internet.
Think about it. To handle their own insane growth, Amazon's engineers had to build this incredible internal computer system, one where they could add storage and computing power instantly. And then came the absolute masterstroke. They looked at this thing they had built, this huge internal cost, and they thought, hey, what if we rented this out to other people? And just like that, they turned a massive expense into a multi-billion-dollar profit machine called Amazon Web Services, or AWS. And the scale of AWS today, it is staggering. It's the invisible plumbing that powers huge chunks of the internet you use every day. We're talking about companies like Netflix, organizations like NASA, even the CIA. And here's the wild part, even Amazon's biggest retail rivals, like Walmart, have to pay them to use their cloud services. Bezos didn't just build a store, he built the utility company for the digital age. And this whole relentless expansion was driven by a single, ruthless mantra from Bezos himself. Your margin is my opportunity. Now, that's not just a catchy business phrase. It's a declaration of war. It basically meant that if your industry was making a healthy profit, you were a target. Amazon would come for you, slash prices, and just operate on razor-thin margins until you were crushed.
Now, of course, that kind of ruthless efficiency, it has a dark side. As millions of small businesses started selling their products on Amazon's marketplace, a really disturbing pattern started to emerge. Sellers accused Amazon of using their own sales data against them, spotting their best-selling products, creating nearly identical Amazon-branded knockoffs, and then promoting those knockoffs on the site. It was like the platform was systematically eating the very entrepreneurs that made it so successful in the first place.
As the company grew into this absolute global behemoth, so did its founder. And you can't really tell the story of modern Amazon without talking about the personal transformation of Jeff Bezos and his pivot toward his ultimate lifelong ambition.
And I mean, the change was dramatic. The awkward, kind of goofy tech nerd from the garage days was long gone. He was replaced by this bald, incredibly fit figure who looked less like a startup founder and more like the final boss in a video game. The guy who once built desks out of cheap doors now owns a $500 million super yacht. The transformation is just wild. By this point, Amazon's tentacles were just everywhere. It wasn't just a marketplace and a cloud company anymore. They bought Whole Foods, so now they're in groceries. They've got Prime Video, so they're in Hollywood. And with Alexa, they are literally in your living room. The everything store had officially become the everything empire.
But with that kind of immense power comes immense scrutiny. In 2020, Bezos gets hauled in front of Congress to answer for the company's dominance. And then, just a year later, in a move that felt almost out of nowhere, he announced he was stepping down as CEO. The architect of the entire machine was moving on.
And this is where the whole story just gets reframed. Because for Bezos, maybe Amazon was never the final goal. Maybe it was just the engine. Maybe it was the incredibly complex trillion-dollar machine he had to build to fund his real dream, the one he talked about all the way back in his high school graduation speech.
Which brings us to the final, fascinating question. The boy who dreamed of space hotels built the world's most powerful economic launchpad right here on Earth. And now he's focused entirely on that next frontier. So as he builds his rockets, we're all left to wonder, what is the final destination?